Hi. Good morning. Good morning. How's everybody doing today? Great? Wonderful. I'm Taryn Almanstar, and on behalf of Columbia's Graduate School of Journalism and the Admissions and Financial Aid Office, welcome. Welcome to the J School, and thank you. Thank you for taking the time on this gorgeous Saturday morning to spend your time with us to learn about our program, how the school fits into your plans, and what we're able to offer. For those of you who are watching us via live stream, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. And thank you as well for taking the time to be with us. Before I get into the logistics and what to expect for the next couple of hours, I would like to know a little bit about yourself. So with a show of hands, if you can tell me, how many of you are from New York? From someplace else within the US? International? Great, welcome. Just so that you know.
I have something to announce about the international.
Do you want to come in here? Because
I'm just going to say it. We also have international students on our live stream who are listening in from Tokyo, from the Czech Republic, from India, from Copenhagen, from Lima, and we also have folks listening in from Maine and from San Francisco today.
thank you, Christine. And for those of you who are watching us via live stream so that you can hear what she just said, she was just acknowledging the fact that you are from all over the world. We know you're watching from the Czech Republic, from India, from Peru, and from all over the US. So moving on, how many of you are interested in the MS full-time program? MS part-time? MS data? MS dual degree with engineering? MA program? PhD? How many of you are still trying to decide which program might be the better fit? Perfect. Okay, so as we move along, what I will encourage each and every one of you to do is to think about where you are in your career and what are the gaps that you need to fill in order to move forward, and how the programs may fit in filling those gaps. Now you can turn to your agenda, and just to give you a little bit of a breakdown of what to expect, we'll have two panels, one of the faculty members and one of the students. Both panels of the members will introduce themselves, talk about their experience, the background, and what you can expect of your time here, and then we'll have you ask questions. Because we have those that are watching us via live stream, you're going to see a mic in the middle over here. If you can step in and you ask that question, that way everybody can hear you and can participate as well. Then we'll have one of our colleagues, Gina Bouillon from Career Development, just talking about what kind of support you're going to get from them and what to expect once you are done with the program. And finally, you will be hearing from us again to talk a little bit about admissions, the process, and the educational financing piece of it. So with that said, if I can invite our faculty members to come to the front.
This is me, right?
No, this is here. Welcome.
Good morning.
Good morning. If each one of you can introduce yourselves, tell us a little bit about your background, what you're doing now, what you teach at the J School, and a little bit about the programs. And remember, then we're going to be opening this up for questions, so start thinking of them as you're hearing. Elena, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi, my name is Elena Cabral. I am the director of the part-time MS program. I'm also a graduate of the program. I was here for 2 years. That's how long the program takes. It's basically the same degree as the full-time program, but spread out over 6 semesters, a summer, fall, and spring, and then another summer, fall, and spring. Most of our students are people in the New York area who have full-time jobs, sometimes part-time jobs, and that was my experience as well. I went on to work for the Miami Herald, Scholastic News. I did some freelancing for magazines and kept in touch with professors here, mentors here, who invited me back to teach and then eventually to run this program, which I'm really proud of. And this is a really wonderful program that has graduated more than 1,000 students now, several Pulitzer winners, and book authors. On November 21st, I think we're going to have a webinar with a number of students, one from the current class, the incoming class, one from the second year class, and one from the recently graduated class of 2019, all of whom have very individual stories. And we'll talk a little bit more in depth about how to balance work, school, and family life, et cetera, et cetera. There's some really extraordinary stories that have come through, and they'll, also break down how the curriculum works. So I'll save that for then, and just let you know that this is a program that is very much catering to the lives of busy people in both programs, but particularly in the part-time program, so that classes are held at night, on weekends. But what I like to tell people is that it's not a night school, and that when you're in this degree program, we like to have students who have the flexibility to enjoy all of the things that we have to offer, all of the speakers and workshops and so forth that go on during the day, in the afternoon, and at night. And, it's a wonderful place to be. Thanks. Go ahead.
Oh, great. So my name's Mark. I guess you could see that. My background is in statistics. I have a doctorate in stat and joined here 7 years ago. I teach mostly in the data and computational tracks, although in the spring I lead a computational journalism class for students who have no background in coding or programming or anything data related. I also run something called the Brown Institute here, which is located just downstairs from this space. It's a joint effort of Columbia Journalism and Stanford Engineering, and our mission is, well, we're primarily a grant-making organization, but our mission is to help, or is to explore the interplay between story and technology in some way, being half in engineering, half in journalism. We've funded a number of students after their year here, after their master's year here, to do projects for another full year. We also contribute to the extracurricular experience you'll have here. We bring in speakers. We have weekend workshops. Last weekend we had one on natural language processing, which was kind of awesome. But we'll have, and the next one coming up is on reporting on Twitter with Craig Silverman. So we bring in speakers and conduct workshops and contribute to the life of the school, even if we're not directly in the classroom. I'll probably stop there.
Thank you, Mark.
My name is Nick Lemon. I'm a professor here. I'm also former dean of the school from 2003 to 2013. I teach primarily in the Master of Arts program, so I'll tell you a little bit about that. We started the Master of Arts program, I think the first graduating class was 2006, so it's been going now for close to 15 years. And it's for what I would call late, early career journalists. It's people who feel that they have the basic reporting skills to do, a breaking news story on deadline and all the things associated with that, but want to take their career to another level, want to get better at understanding complicated subjects that traditional in-newsroom or in-school training doesn't really go to. So we started the program as for people in that situation. And we've had a wonderful run for all this time with, for whatever reason, that program tends to be majority non-U.S., so it's very internationally diverse and diverse in other ways. And graduates have gone on to do all sorts of wonderful and amazing things. The construct of the program, when we started the program, and we've kind of moved beyond this because of life in the digital age, the MS program had 4 majors by delivery medium, print, broadcast, what we quaintly called new media, and magazines. That was the 4th one? So we tried to match that in the MA program by also having 4 majors that were subject related. So the idea of the program is it's platform agnostic, subject specific, although there's some sense that if you figure out how to learn a subject in a deep way, that could be transferred to another subject. But in the MA program, you apply into a major specifically, although sometimes we call you up and say, we think maybe you should be in another major, or maybe you should be in the MS program. We call MS people and say maybe you should be in the MA program. We're a family operation. The 4 majors are politics, which is the one where I teach, arts and culture, business and economics, which is where Winnie teaches, so she'll talk about that, and science, environment, technology. So that's how that program works. I want to say also, I myself am a journalist, and I'm not an ex-journalist, I'm still a journalist, and that's a lot of the culture of the school is a lot of the faculty, including Winnie, for example, are working journalists who are deeply involved in the profession as well as teaching here. My little corner of journalism is mostly magazine and book writing, so I'm a staff writer for the New Yorker, and I write books also. One other thing I wanted to mention briefly is this question of, if you want to be a lawyer or a doctor, you got to go to the professional school. You don't really have a choice because these are licensed professions. Journalism school is a little more like business school, except maybe as regards starting salary, in the sense that lots of people in the field didn't go to the school and have a degree, and lots of people in the field did go to the school and have a degree. So there's the question of, should I go, when should I go, etc. I think we're all really confident that here in this school, we can get you in a year way beyond where you were when you entered in a very wide range of areas, from, again, how to understand complicated subjects to how to make a documentary to how to code, all that stuff. Newsrooms increasingly are not built as quasi-teaching institutions, so we do that. If you feel there's something you as a working journalist can't do, we can probably get you to where you can do that. If you feel I'm not a working journalist and I don't know quite how to become one, we can get you there too. And we're very available to have individual consultation on, is this the moment to go to journalism school? Is this the right decision for you? We don't use this lingo they're here, but they do over at the business school of marginal utility. Do you know that term? What that means is essentially, don't think about it as either you have to go or you don't have to go. Think about it as, is it useful to you in the moment you're in your life? And that's the way to frame the decision. And, the answer isn't always yes, but it's often yes. I wouldn't get caught up on the either you don't have to go or you do have to go, because nobody has to go here. It's a choice because we're not a licensed profession. But, we think it's a good choice.
Thank you, Nick.
Hi, I'm Winnie O'Kelly, and I'm the newest member of the MA program. So Nick's given you a nice outline of it. Because I'm new, I'll say this, it's fun. I'm really enjoying it. This is my second year teaching in the business and economics concentration and running that program. I love the mix of international and domestic students. And what I generally tell my students, because of what I do, is I have so enjoyed business and economics journalism throughout my career, in part because of the intellectual push of it. There are a lot of beautiful writers out there who do wonderful things. And I have found in my career, I've been pushed to the limit constantly. Now it's into impeachment and money laundering and all of those kinds of things that we've been working on for a long time. And I want to help, create another big rung of journalists who will go out and do that into the world. So I'm really passionate about it. I find my students are pretty passionate about it. We have intense discussions. It's a small group, and I can tell you it's very engaged every week. The future of capitalism, what should it be? What should our tax system look like? What's inequality like around the world? These are our conversations every single week. We're doing academic readings. We bring in economics professors and others who are experts in the profession. In the fall, we focus more on the macroeconomics idea, which is looking at economies and all the economic agents and the labor markets. And in the spring, we look a lot more at companies and industries. And I really enjoy it, and I think the students do too. The other thing I will say for anyone who's thinking about the business concentration is that there is a great demand for students. And there really are. I have people throughout the area and literally across the country who are looking for more business journalists to hire, people with skills. So if you're looking for something to give you that special sauce, I think that's one of the things you find in the MA program. So I'd encourage you to think about that. And the other little plug I'll give for this is I was at the New York Times for 20 years, loved it. I'm now at Bloomberg News. And what I found there was that the top editors, and I can list them from Joe Lelyveld on down, he said, if you want to be a foreign correspondent, if you want to be a political reporter, if you want to do this, I want you to spend time in the business section because I want you to understand money and how it's the foundation of what's going on in these areas. So a lot of people who come to business concentration, some of them aren't going to go and become business journalists, but they're going to ultimately use that to do other things. And I find that really rewarding too. I want a more economically literate group of people out there, especially in journalism. So I hope you'll apply, and I hope whether you're in the MS program, where a lot of those folks come and talk to me about their careers and their futures and what they want to do, and I like talking to them, I hope you'll look me up.
Yes, thank you. I would like to open it up for questions now. So if you can come to the mic and ask any questions that you may have of our faculty members. It's a group of journalists. Mm-hmm. Okay, it seems like we have a question from the live stream. No? Okay, so I have a question. I'll ask, all right? What is your ideal student? If I am sitting there and I've listened to this wonderful panel and I'm thinking I can either go into the MS or I can go into the MA, how do you make that decision, or what should be taken into account?
Well, I'll take a swing at it. I think Nick hit on it a little bit. Ideally, someone coming into the MA program would be a fairly comfortable writer. Now, I have to admit, I have some people from across the spectrum, some people who have like law degrees or have done business stuff and want to become essentially journalists. And we can make that work, but I do think the best is somebody who's a comfortable writer, who sort of understands the architecture of a news story. And some of them, frankly, are coming from broadcast, and I find that they're not quite as comfortable in the written form, but they certainly understand the elements of a story. And I think that's what we're looking for. And then we hope to take you deeper into the subject matter so that when you get out of my concentration, for example, you can look at financial statements and you can be really comfortable delving into shell companies, and it's not going to throw you.
Okay, perfect. I'm going to piggyback on that. Come on, guys, help me out. Ask questions. Do you need a business background or a mathematical background to go into the business concentration?
Absolutely not. I was a journalism undergrad major, by the way, and I am self-taught on economics and business topics, but I've spent a long time doing it, and I was very lucky to have a lot of people who worked with me intensively. And so what I hope to do is to do that for the students in a very short period of time, what took me a lot of years. And so you don't have to, just as long as you're willing to give it a shot.
Perfect. Can we talk a little bit about the MS? That was wonderful.
Yeah. In the MS program, what I think is really wondrous about it is that we have students who run the gamut, students who are just right out of school, and then those who have been in the profession for a number of years but are missing a piece of investigative reporting skills or digital skills, video skills, documentary, or have a book idea that they really want to develop. And it works for each and every one of them. In the part-time program as well, we have a good mix of students who are on this spectrum and who bring a lot to the discussions and have something that they are hoping to fill that will get them past this ceiling that they sort of keep hitting, or this barrier that they keep running into. And what I look for in applications are people, as Winnie said, who have a decent writing ability. But I also think that we all share a real desire to see a deep-seated curiosity among our students in terms of the world and its institutions and how things work, how money works, as Winnie pointed out, how we're influenced by culture and technology, and certainly, whenever I meet new people and they sort of say, well, I don't really like to talk about politics, my first reaction is, why? This is what is happening right now in this weird-ass time that we're living in is so profound, and it really makes our profession more important than ever. And it's an exciting time to want to be a part of it, to want to tell important stories, and so that is the sort of thing that comes across sometimes from people who are giving up law professions or in the nonprofit world, people who have had a long time desire to change the world in some way, and are coming to us with that drive, with that sense of engagement in what is happening in this world. And that's plenty to work with. I'm no longer working as a journalist, but because I'm a really dedicated administrator and I get to know the students from the time they apply to the time they graduate, and I'm a sort of like obsessive editor, I do these line edits on their work that can sting a little bit, but that really transform the way that they communicate. You have to be willing, no matter where you are in your life or in your professional, career, to forget everything that you think you know about good writing and good communication, and let us turn that into a higher level of storytelling with impact, storytelling with data, fact-checking with depth, with authority, that sort of thing. Those are all the elements that come with this wonderful mixture that we have of the fundamental reporting class, the writing class, investigative techniques. And then, once you have all of those basics down, whether you're in the part-time or full-time program, you have the ability to create your own curriculum by going into subject areas such as video storytelling, audio, podcast storytelling, using data, for example, or move into subject areas that intrigue you. Investigating healthcare, for example, is one of the classes that we offer in the spring. Writing, sports writing, certainly business reporting. That's one of the things that if you choose not to go into the MA program, you should know that you do have the ability to explore those topics to a certain extent anyway, in the MS degree as well. So there's a lot of room to develop and create your own curriculum as you go along.
Mark, can you tell us a little bit about computational and data and how that's used in journalism?
Sure.
And how people should not be intimidated by if you don't have that background?
Sure. So, to echo what Elena was saying, we recruit people into the classes that I teach. People are curious again about the way the world functions, but now maybe not the way the world functions through the overt acts of politicians and so on, but the accumulation of data, code, algorithms, right, are increasingly forming systems of power in our world, and someone has to be able to interrogate and decide, is that algorithm that my community has just purchased, that software package that's placing police every evening in the streets, is it doing that in an equitable and fair way? Or the software that is deciding whether or not someone gets bail, is that doing that in a fair and equitable way? If journalists aren't able to ask questions about those systems, they run unchecked. I don't know how many of you have seen, the Times is running a piece about how Trump is changing our democracy in the last 11,000 tweets or something like that, right? So taking text, taking social media, looking at these systems and how they operate, deciding if they're operating and designed in a fair way or not, those are all the kinds of things that we prepare you for in these computational classes. So it's not here's a spreadsheet and we're going to take the average of this column, right? That's sort of that never happens in my class. Instead, we talk about here's one of the first exercises is to think about Twitter or Instagram or one of these social platforms and look at what the equivalent of trending is and how is that computed and what's going on there. Because a lot of the algorithms that govern the way that we communicate today aren't described anywhere, right? So you start typing something into Google and it completes it for you. Where does that come from, right? And what sorts of messages is it secretly giving you, right? Because most people assume that it's coming because it's sort of the popular thing that other people have typed. But is it? Because Google doesn't write anything about that. And so there are a lot of systems that need to be or should be examined, and a lot of really good reporting that's been happening. And our goal in the data and the computational track is to help you bring that natural curiosity that you have about the way the world functions and carry it to the functioning of the aspect of the world that may be hidden because it's behind a computer system somewhere or it's behind an algorithm somewhere. And how do you start to ask questions?
That's perfect. Thank you. David?
We have a few questions from the live stream. One from Shelby. She's interested to find out if it's possible to take video or audio storytelling in the MA program. Could you talk about that a little bit?
Up to a point. So we have in the MA program a thesis project that's really an amazingly big, ambitious piece of journalism for a one-year program. Many or even most of the students do the reporting all over the world, for example. And, you can execute the thesis in any medium you want. So most of them are print or, on a piece of paper. But every year, some of them are documentary, podcast, et cetera. And we're totally happy to do that and to give you the skills backup to be able to do that. What would be harder, ask yourself what you want. If what you want is really heavy-duty instruction in how to be a video journalist from a standing start, the MS program is probably a better bet. If you've already done some of that and you want to execute projects in a video format or audio format, or even a data journalism format, we can do that in the MA program. We can provide some skills class backup as well as mentoring from somebody who does that for a living to get you through this capstone project. But it's not primarily a skills acquisition program. Well, when I say skills, it's substance understanding skills primarily, not delivery system mastery skills. So I don't want to oversell, our ability to take somebody like me who's never done video and turn them into a video journalist full stop in a year.
Fair enough. Thank you.
Right, and one more question. This is from Amna. She has a BA in politics. Very little journalism experience. She's done a few internships. But she has a question. She's interested in the MA program, specifically business. And she wants to know what types of challenges for someone who's come into the program who might not have a lot of experience.
I think the main thing is sort of understanding basic news story and feature story kind of structure, right? So I think if you're a intensive reader and consumer of everything like that, and you've sort of in your mind, worked on story structure and you have an idea of it, you come into the program and you be a little bit humble you can get a ton out of it. I've seen people really make extraordinary progress. There's a writing center also. I know that sounds kind of unusual, attached to the journalism school, and people who maybe haven't done as much of like heavy duty writing on deadline and that kind of thing. I encourage them to, work with the center. So every week they'll also get feedback, not just from me, and I'm a brutal line editor too, I can tell you. But in addition, they can get it from somebody else even before they come to me. And so what I think you get out of this program, if you put yourself into it, is imagine you're getting like several years of editing of your work, all concentrated in like 9 months. That's an extraordinary ability for a young journalist to like push ahead.
Perfect. Yes.
Got a couple people coming.
Yes, come to the mic. Yes.
Hi, I'm Heidi. So I kind of have a question for the MA program. So I'm wondering how much like collaboration there is between like different concentrations, and like to what extent can you kind of dabble in different things? Because I often think about, you can't really think about politics without thinking economics, and you can't really think about technology without thinking about business. So I'm kind of curious about that.
Well, Winnie and I occasionally have a joint class. We had one a couple weeks ago. And we often get people who are trying to decide between politics and economics. I want to say a little more in answer to that about the sort of the way the program works. So in the olden days, the theory of this school and most other journalism schools was we teach skills that live inside newsrooms. And if you want to learn the substance of a topic, you should go to another part of the university to learn that. So we're kind of modifying or pushing back that old theory. Our MA students do take courses, usually 3 one-semester courses at other parts of the university. It's a little different for the business concentration, which Winnie can explain. The politics students, the most common destination is the School of International and Public Affairs over across Amsterdam Avenue. But we also cooperate a lot with the rest of the university, so political scientists will often appear in my politics seminar, and political journalists will too. We're trying to bring 2 worlds together, and the point of that is, the x-axis is major to major, and the y-axis is J-School to the rest of the university, so I'm addressing both a little bit here. If you take courses at SEPA, what you will write is a term paper. If you take political science-oriented material in the MA program, you're translating in real time that kind of material into a work of journalism, which I think is very, very valuable. And we're sort of doing the real-time cross-pollination. We're a small kind of family-type program. We all know each other. We're all friends, and we're well aware that a lot of the particularly thesis projects span or cross different borders, and we'll work hard to make a story about the art market, let's say, or a story that combines, science and business or something like that. Well, we can make that happen for you. We do have these seminars in the discipline that are a big part of your experience. So I don't want to, say you can be in both seminars, because that would be a lot of hours and they meet at the same time. There's also a class that I teach in the fall that all the MA students take called Evidence and Inference, which is a kind of methodological course for journalists, and that crosses all the disciplines.
I will say this, I'm very aware of the desire for more crossover, so I'm trying to do more of that. One of the examples is in the spring I'm going to do something on environment and on carbon tax and sort of like the economics of climate change with that concentration. So no, you can't do it all, and in fact, I want to be honest about this. If you come into the business concentration, there's a lot to learn. I don't want to pretend otherwise. There's an accounting course in the fall, and there's a corporate finance course in the spring, and you really get a lot out of that. But the flip side is employers love that. They'll look at these people and go, wow, they know what they're talking about. And so that's the downside of not being able to do everything, is you get something really deep that was really useful in your future career.
Part of the comparative advantage of the MA program is, we'd ask ourselves the question when we were designing it, if X is something you can turn to the person next to you in a newsroom and say, explain X to me, and they say, okay, da-da-da. We don't want to teach that in the MA program. If you turn to the person next to you in the newsroom and you ask them that question, they say, I don't know, I'm completely stumped by that. That's where we come in, because we can kind of get you over that hump because of being located in a university and having these deep relationships with expertise in all areas.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Wedler Jules. I'm from Canada, Eastern Canada. It's New Brunswick. It's like 12 hours from Montreal. My question is, you were talking about, I understood like you were talking about bias, like, but the way as Canadian we see how the U.S. journalist reacts, like if you call CNN, for example, anyway, I stopped watching U.S. news because it's crazy. If you call Don Lemon, you say Trump, he jump. And if you call, I don't know, Sean Hannity, you said Obama will jump. So it's all biased, like no matter which media that you turn into. And I'm wondering in here, is it like real journalism? Or because I don't know what them people doing, like on CNN and Fox News and, because it seems to me like they're on a mission. They are more into the propaganda agenda, and I don't know what they're doing, honestly. But my background's not in journalism,
Yeah.
It's in public administration. So I don't really know what it is, but I do know it's not what I expect it could be, So I don't know what type of, if I decide to enroll into any program here, are we gonna teach real journalism? Because I don't know what them people doing yet.
It's a great question, and here's how I would answer it, at least. I think this has been a big change in the school, at least in the 16 going on 17 years I've been here. When I first came, a lot of us were very naive, and we thought, there are these big news organizations like the Washington Post and the New York Times and Time and Newsweek and the LA Times and TV networks, and they're the pillars of journalism, and they will always, be there, and the rest of the world, the entire world looks to them for guidance, et cetera. So if you said this is how we do it in these kind of mainstream established news organizations, that's all you need to know, no matter where you're from, et cetera. And I think we've gotten a lot more sophistication and a lot more humility over the years. We didn't have then, and we now have a required history of journalism course for all the MS students, and a required ethics course, and a required course on the business side of journalism. And all of those are meant to kind of decenter you and say, we want you not to accept, the stone tablets principles of journalism, but instead to think about the various contexts in which journalism has existed over the years and in different places in the world, and help you kind of make up your own mind of where we should be. I think that's really, really important, and it happens somewhat naturally because our student body is so diverse, by geography, by medium, et cetera. So what I would hope is to get you thinking. It's kind of like if you look at these are little trees, but if you look at a big tree, like there's the trunk and then there's the branches, right? Yeah. So, there's some trunk in journalism, like, in any circumstances in this institution, we wouldn't be comfortable with saying it's okay to make stuff up, or like some of the stuff in your story can be true and some of it can be made up. That's cool. We're not going to say that. So that's their core principles. But then there's the branches, and there's a lot of different norms that prevail in different places at different times because of cultural factors, national culture, economic factors, et cetera. And it's more like being aware of that And we're trying to prepare you to be a leader in journalism over the next generation or two. And a lot of our students become that. So it's much, I feel this very keenly for my generation. We were told life will always be the same as what you're experiencing now as a young journalist. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
And boy, was that not true. So what we're trying to tell you is life is not always going to be the same, and we want to prepare you kind of intellectually and otherwise to negotiate choppy seas, ever-changing, uncertain conditions, and figure out kind of where you have to be, where you want to be.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Bridget. I have 3 questions, if you don't mind. The first one is, I understand that the full-time MS program is designed in a way that we should not be working in addition to doing that. And I wanted to just understand what the day looks like so that makes it so difficult to do. That's one. The second one is for the MS program, when we're applying and we don't have any journalistic samples, what in our writing do you kind of expect? And the last one is that I feel that we are in a time where people are striving to live as authentically as possible and tell their stories as authentically as possible, and they don't mind using their voice, no matter how jarring or different that is. How much does the MS program strive to focus on the traditional ways of journalism as opposed to developing personal voices?
That's a great question.
Do you want to do the first one? And then
Yeah, the full-time MS program, even though I'm kind of biased, I like the part-time program a lot because it stretches this wonderful experience of student status that we all took for granted in college over 2 years, and all of the perks and privileges that come with it, and the pace is really great. It is pretty cool to get an MS degree and get into journalism in 10 months and have all of these coaches and mentors really getting you in shape by teaching you the requirements of news gathering, of ethics, making sure you don't get sued, making sure you understand copyright and so forth. It's a lot of information to pack into 10 months. But it's not just the class time. This is a professional school in which we expect our students to use New York City as their laboratory. And so a lot depends on how much you use your time outside of this building, right? And for a lot of folks, I like to think that in a work, for a single story, what I tell my students, my part-time students, is that you should factor in at least 6 to 8 hours of reporting time, and reporting and writing time. And as with all things, reporting just isn't a finite thing. People don't want to talk to you. People will yell at you. People will run away from you. And you have to it takes time to sort of learn those things. So, it's interesting because sometimes our students will say, hey, let's join a rock climbing club or a sewing club or a jazz quartet, which is cool, particularly if you're in an undergraduate environment or a campus such as Columbia where there's a lot going on. But after a while, they realize reporting is hard work and it takes time. And so what they find is that the various interviews and research and just the idea of being there, being present where news is happening as opposed to phoning it in or looking it up online is something that is part of the instruction here. And so therefore it really precludes any opportunity to do to work in any meaningful way. It would really just be way too much. There are internships that students prepare to apply for. And you'll hear a bit in a moment from Gina Boubion about the amount of work that entails. I've often said that we should have career development as a accredited class here, because there's so much involved in learning how to write how to put together a successful resume, how to write a killer cover letter, how to do interviews properly, and all of those things go on as well during the course of a week. And even our full-time students never seem to have enough time to attend all of those things. And so for that reason, but the internships that we prepare you to apply for, and that you begin putting your work samples together, starting from your reporting class, start very early in the fall for the summer. And these are internships that are not like the kind you had in the summer where you're just sort of building up your resume and they expect you to go back to school when it's over. These are more tryouts. These are more internships that are looking to find talent and keep them.
On the third question, that's a complicated one. I feel a few things. So I feel like where we provide value for you is teaching you how to be a reporter. So, and you sort of have to do that. Like if you come into the airspace of the school and say, I just want to learn to write and I actually don't want to do any reporting, it's not going to be a good fit, and you should go to the School of the Arts right across the way. I recognize that a lot of journalism is personal. When we sit down in February and read applications, we get a high proportion of people who say to us, and this gets to your second question too, because we have essays and a test and so on. They say, I have a passion to go into journalism because I want to call attention to X, and X is part of my life story. It's not just me, but it's, you know, it's resonant for me. The general tenor of the school is to say, take your passion for X and like turn it outward and not inward. But it's a free country. I don't think, honestly, a lot of professors would love to get sort of memoiristic or first-person work unless it has a research component kind of attached to it. A lot of things can begin with, this happened to me, but then there's a sort of jump into, here's the bigger picture that I've gathered through reporting. I also think just as a life strategy, and here I'm going back to the long ago days when I was starting as journalist, in those days, this will resonate with you too, there was a kind of, like if you said, the people who are journalists and the people who are paid salaries to be journalists, there's kind of an overlap there. Now there's the people who are paid salaries who are to be journalists, which is like this many people, and then there's this huge group of people who self-identify as journalists, basically posting online, you know, opinions and personal material. So if you want to be in the minority of self-identified journalists who get paid to be journalists, I think it's really good to get reporting skills.
I'm just going to add one little comment there, because I know that people come into Nick's class, because they come into my class and talk about it, and they say, he tells us to put our opinions aside and to see what the facts are. And I think that's hard for a lot of people. So it's a discipline you're learning. And truthfully, the way you develop a voice is by being confident enough and being analytical enough about the material that you can speak with authority. And that is really a big piece of voice that you have to work on.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'll be brief. So with the MS program, do you find a lot of students graduate from that program and then come back for a deeper dive into a subject area in the MA program? Or do they go to the MS and, you know, they go out in the field and that's where they get their experience?
Okay, so that's a good question and with a clear answer. And it's interesting. So the president of Columbia, Lee Bollinger, now nearing the end of his long run of what will be 20 years, when he first came, like kind of the first thing he did was say, I'm putting the spotlight on the journalism school. And he led a process of sort of re-examination of the journalism school, and at the end of which he wrote a kind of memo of what he thought the journalism school should be. And one of the points that was very controversial internally was the length of time to degree. I believe that, and you know, you're the statistician, so you'll have to test me on this. If you said to yourself, I want to get a degree in something at an Ivy League university, what is the lowest average tuition paid per student of any degree in any field at any Ivy League school? I think this is it. And, you know, we do that because we're mindful of, you know, it's not a high-paid profession and we're charging a lot of money. But that's sort of the context. So when President Bollinger wrote his memo, it said, journalism school degree should be at least 2 years, and it probably should be 3 years, because journalists are so important and they really need to be so good at what they do, they need a deep education. We decided to start the MA program initially as a sort of experiment, as an optional second year. So the first, and we, almost at the last minute, we said, well, if anybody wants to come in just de novo, that's fine. There's actually a lesson here in life, which is you have to be prepared for things not to turn out exactly the way you think they will, but that's not necessarily bad. So the first couple of years, we were mostly people choosing to do a second year in the school. And then after that, it sort of developed as a separate program. So now we are open for business for people who would like to spend a second year or return to the school after a couple years away, and we get some of those people, but most of the cohort in MA are coming in, fresh to the school. It's their only year at the school. But my personal preference would be to do 2 years, and it's actually designed to sort of fit with the MS program as a sequential second year, but it's an option that very few people take.
Yes, we'll have time for one more question. Mm-hmm.
Great. Perfect timing. Thank you. Hi, my name is Brett Oresco. I was curious to know, you kind of touched on this earlier, Nicholas, but the journalism profession has obviously undergone a lot of changes lately, and there are issues like fake news and differentiating analysis and opinion from the hardcore facts that people don't have as easy of a time with maybe as in prior generations. And I want to know, what are some of the differences in the type of students that you've seen apply? What are some of the differences in their career paths afterwards? How have you seen things change in the last 5-10 years from the sort of, I don't want to say staid, but the old style of journalism that I feel like was at least the perception for a very long time?
Mm-hmm. I think there's less than you'd think. In other words, as I said, I believe the school has gotten a little less stone tablet-y in saying this is journalism and this is not journalism. We had a now departed professor, I'm thinking of particularly Steve Isaacs, who you knew, who used to like giving those. So on the other hand, the people who come to the school tend to, broadly speaking, share a set of values around the importance of journalism in society, around the importance of reporting, around the importance of getting it right and distinguishing, what's true and not true, what's fact and what's opinion, and trying to get at the general truth of things. So I'd say it's more, the school has changed, but the world outside the school has changed more than the school has changed. Now that gets into a lot of cosmic issues. We haven't mentioned this because it's not this group, but we have a PhD program that I think is, not obviously related to what you guys would be studying, but is really important to have as part of the school. You'll see this if you walk in the lobby. There's some this is kind of one of the places in the world where the conversation about the future of journalism takes place. And it's like every day, there's some poster, some flyer, where's this all going? The PhD people tend to work on the context in which journalism takes place. A lot of the issue you're raising gets to a really profound question, which is, should the internet be an open platform or not? Or should it be restricted? That's not a question about what we do, but it's a question about the rules in the larger society in which we exist.
But how much does what you do at a place like this play into that and dictate that?
I mean, I always say, like whenever I go to like a proverbial backyard barbecue, something like that, somebody always says to me, what are you going to do about fake news? And you all have had that experience. And I always say to them, you're asking the wrong guy. Journalists don't make fake news. Non-journalists make fake news, So it's not like ask them, but it's, we as journalists need to think about how willing we are to create a different kind of context in which people receive news, and to some extent in which news is produced. And I don't think there's a lot of consensus about that around the school, but that's what makes life interesting. In a certain way, stretching a little, you could say the role the internet plays today is very roughly the role broadcast journalism played in the mid-20th century. In the mid-20th century, broadcast journalism in the U.S. was a heavily regulated industry in which it was illegal because the federal government said so to publish fake news or broadcast fake news. And in most countries in the developed world, it was a state-owned industry. So that's a really big difference. And now we've gone to a much more libertarian approach. And if you embrace a libertarian approach, you're going to get good journalism mixing up with bad journalism. And then you get into an even more profound question of, can people tell the difference? Do they care about the difference? What's our potential? What's our role as journalists in helping the public differentiate between them? It's kind of like saying, fellow panelists, how do you have a happy marriage? Important topic, something you might spend a lot of your life thinking about, not something we're going to settle once and for all within the walls of this school, but we are responsible for being one of the most important places in the world where that gets debated.
And
Thank you.
researched. We do a lot of really wonderful research, and I invite you to look at the Tao Center and the Brown Institute's work at looking at our profession and studying it and developing ways, harnessing the tools that are available. I'm about to get on a plane to Barcelona to teach a class on reporting with social media. That's why I was asking what Craig was up to, and so I could pick his brain a little bit, because it is a moving target. But it is an enormous world of innovation happening that is available to us as journalists to use, and that I think is an emerging field, not just for niche people who, whose only job is to spot fake news and eliminate it, but for all journalists to be able to recognize and to avoid, but also to shed light on, in terms of illuminating for readers what's real and what's not. And in a moment, you're going to hear in terms of the types of news organizations that exist today, from Gina Boubion, who takes the lead in putting together the biggest journalism job fair anywhere, right across the courtyard in Lerner Hall. And what amazes me about that event every year is that the legacy companies will always show up, the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, and so forth. But it's almost a course unto itself for the staff of the Career Development Office to learn about all of the new digital-only platforms that are really pushing the envelope of storytelling, and with crazy names like Pineapple Media or Pineapple Street Media and so forth. And we study them carefully, and we have a very high standard about who participates in this event, so that they will provide a learning experience for our students. And so I invite you all, when Gina tells you where to look on our website, at the organizations and companies that our students end up at, and how proud we are of the fact that they're willing to sort of, take off the cloak of traditional journalism, take what they've learned here and try something different and new.
So with that, I would like to thank our panel. The faculty, thank you so much. This has been great. And I would like to invite my colleague, Christine Souders, who is the Dean of Admissions and Financial Aid, and the student panel to step forward as well.
Good morning to everybody. One of the things that I wanted to just make a note of is that there is a lot of food here, food and drink. So if you feel that you need a little bit of refreshment at any point as we're talking, because I know that there's a lot going on in our conversations today, please feel free just to go up. There are some sweet rolls, some sandwiches. We're trying to be healthy here, but the sweet rolls smell really good. So, what we'd like to do next, we're going to move now from our faculty panel to our student panel, and they are each going to introduce themselves briefly and say a few words about how they got here, maybe what their thinking process was, what they're doing here, which program they're in, what their journalistic interests are. But I also know that usually the students or the prospective students in the audience have a ton of questions for the students. They're not paid, they're not coached, so you can ask them anything that you want. And so I would like to with a lot of pride, introduce our student panelists, and I'm going to ask Zoe to start off this morning with a bit of an introduction about herself, and then we'll go straight down through to An, Ian, Allison, and Tommy. They come from all over the country in the United States, all over the world, and I think we'll show you what they're reflective of what our student body is. So, Zoe.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Christine. And hi to you all. I'm really happy to be speaking to you guys today. My name is Zoe Chiriseri, as you can all see. I'm from Zimbabwe and South Africa. And a bit about my background. I did law, and then I ended up working in film and television, but very much in a fiction space. My decision to come to Columbia was very specific in terms of being in the visual field of telling stories. And I think one of the major things that made me determined to be at Columbia, because I did apply twice. I applied in 2016 and I did get in, and then I had like a personal crisis, and I applied a second time to come this year, is definitely the people. My interactions with the people, I mean, I was all the way in South Africa, but speaking to the people on the phone, like they immediately made me feel like a human being as opposed to a number. And I think by the time I got here, it's lived up to my expectations. Once you're in the school, you're not just a student. Like there's a sense that they actually know you and were expecting you, and even in your classes, you get that personal attention that makes you feel like they've chosen you for a reason. So that's in essence what, for me, set the journalism school apart, besides being the best journalism school in the world, which I mean is one of the major things that made a difference for me. I wanted to come to a graduate program that wouldn't be like undergrad, where you're kind of just being pushed through a system to get a degree. The other thing, what are we supposed to touch on? I'm in the documentary specialization track, so that's basically what we do. Is what I wanted from it is, within the first hour of our class, we were given this massive camera, a C200. It's like a really badass camera. And they showed us like for about half an hour, 45 minutes, like, okay, these are the buttons you need to press, and then go and do it. And I think that's what exactly I wanted, because it's like a lot of the things that you're terrified to do, whether it's writing, speaking to people, getting out there, they're like, okay, and you're going to do audio, so go outside and record it right now. That's like what the journalism school's about. It's like all the things that you were kind of afraid to maybe do on your own, or maybe you've tried to do on your own and you're not sure if you're doing it right. You get that immediately, like you're go, 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 go. And I think what I would say is, in preparation for coming, is try and get as much of a schedule together as possible, because like there's going to be 100 things coming at you, like, and super exciting things. Like there's talks, there's people to meet, there's, I mean, just your professors, besides people coming in to speak to you, just the professors here there's just so much wealth of knowledge and experience here. So if you come with a schedule, like, and a plan of how you're gonna actually make meaningful connections with people here, I think that helps a lot. And also have a mind to also get to know the people who you're studying with, because there's some incredible people who also get selected to be in the same year as you and who are essentially going to be your colleagues in the field. And so because it's such a short space of time, it's really important to like make meaningful connections with them. And yeah, that's the long and short of it from me.
Okay.
Zoe.
I'm Tuan. I'm in the MS program. I'm a full-time student. So I'm from California, from LA, and then came out here for this program. I had always wanted to get a graduate degree. I didn't know in what, but education was important to my family. So, I applied here because, and the same reason I became a journalist was I like challenging myself, and I feel like this is something where every day you're pushing yourself harder and harder and harder. Before I came here, I was a bio major, I was a psychology major. I worked as a pediatric assistant and then did journalism as well. So I interned in college. I wrote for Yahoo Sports for about a year and then came here. My advice would be, take the work seriously, but don't take yourself too seriously. You're in a great city, and I think before I came here, I set goals for myself. I was like, okay, you're in a city where you have all these organizations, you have all these news people, try to meet them, like no better place. So what I do is not just faculty, like people in the city, you just reach out, you're like, hey, I'm a student, I want to learn more about XYZ, set up a meeting, whatever. And I think that's one of the best ways to learn as well, not just from the class. So, and like Zoe said, the people here are amazing. You never know who you'll meet. She's actually in my ethics and law class. So we met there, and we met through other friends as well. Yeah.
I'm Ian. I'm in the MS Stabile program. I'm originally from Vancouver. I moved to Chicago to actually start my PhD in econ, and then went to consulting afterwards. And I think, what really attracted me to the school is really like the Stabile program, which is the sort of investigative specialization within the MS program. And just having access to the people and the resources to really dive in and learn how to do serious investigative analytical work. I don't think there's another program that has the resources and the people who can push you that hard. I also want to second, the professors here are amazing, but the students here are also exceptional. I've learned so much from the people who were in my classes. I don't really have much journalism experience. A lot of the people who I'm in classes with do have serious experience and have done really impressive stuff. So, for that reason too, you're going to be around people who are going to be like the next generation of amazing journalists, and you get to sit and hang out with them and be their friend. It's really incredible.
Hi everyone, I'm Alison Kentish. I'm from the island of Dominica in the Caribbean, but I've spent the last 10 years in St. Lucia. I work in television, and if you know the Caribbean, the small islands, the TV market is really small, so there is also the Caribbean Media Corporation, and it encapsulates all the various television stations from across the Caribbean, so that when we report, the entire region can get an idea of what's going on in your country. I'm in the MA Science program, and I guess you've been doing a lot of research, but for those of you would have heard this morning that for the MA program, you need to have experience in journalism. So those of us in the program have various levels of experience, some about 4 years, some like me, 10, some even more. And I decided to apply because I've been writing about climate change and the environment from my region for quite a few years now. I write both for television and for AlertNet, which is the humanitarian news arm of the Thomson Reuters Foundation. The goal is to cover underreported stories from across the world. And right now, yes, climate change is now a big thing, but when I started about 8 years ago, it couldn't get the level of the spotlight that you wanted. So I work in live news. Our flagship newscast is at 7 p.m. If something is left on the cutting room floor, it would be the climate change and the environment story. Because, of course, other politics, two politicians going at it on the platform it's just more, catchy for your audience than environment. So I'm happy that the environment, a changing climate, is now taking center stage. We're getting the headlines, we're getting top billing in our newscasts. And although I've been writing about the environment for a while, I knew that I now need to zero in on my niche area. And I felt that the science program here at Columbia was unparalleled. There's just no other like it. And I was right. I'm happy to report that I was right. And I can tell you so just a few months in. We have a seminar. It's every specialization, because there's politics, there's business, there's arts and culture, there's science. So the seminar is particularly important. I think it's a world-class experience and opportunity to delve into your niche area. So whatever your niche area is. And just to give you a brief idea of what we've been doing, I took some notes because it's so much. We go back before we come to 2019, or we look ahead. And when I tell you we go back, we go way back, as in Galileo. We go back to Galileo and the history of science and all the basics, the fundamentals, issues you might think might not have anything to do with what you're doing at the moment. Because when our science seminar professor, Jonathan Wiener, told us we're going to the American Museum of Natural History, we're going to learn about dinosaurs and climate change, I'm like, okay, so, where's the connection? And at the end of that tour, I told him, okay, I see it now, because we're dealing with mass extinctions, and now we're actually in the 6th mass extinction, and it all ties in. So we did evolution, we did statistics, we did biology and society, the history of science, and another really fascinating aspect of that program, the science program, I can speak more on it, it's the one I'm in, it's our guest lecturers. We've had some of the most brilliant and amazing people on earth coming into our class every single week to teach us more about their area of specialization. So just for example, we had Dr. Martina Pavlikova, who is at the Columbia Medical School, and she came in and she taught us more on biostatistics and looking at medical papers, how to go through them. Sometimes we see them, I would see them, and I would avoid them because they were just so complex. And she taught us how to just break down a paper and see if it's worthy of something that you would want to write more on. Just a quick thing, I did not add that it's not just science, it's science and health. So you do a lot of science reporting, you do a lot of health reporting. Again, we had Paul Olson, who's I think he's a rock star paleontologist. There's no other like him when it comes to dinosaurs. And he taught us about climates back then, times when the climate of the world changed. We had Dan Kevles, he's a history professor at Yale, and he taught us about the history of science also. And for the last 2 weeks, we've been writing about end-of-life issues, which is something, again, a lot of us in writing about science avoid. But it opened my mind a lot to dignity in dying, issues around death and healthcare, and I think which is a really important aspect. Another fascinating side of this program, that's the ME program. This semester we're challenged to take a course outside the journalism school, and your professors challenge you to take something that will push you to go deeper, and if possible to do that within something that has to do with your thesis. So I decided to take disasters and development, and yes, it's really challenging, and I don't regret it one bit. It brought together the science behind disasters, earthquakes, tsunamis, learning more about the earth and what is happening, and then the development side, we have a visiting professor from the UK, PhD from Oxford, and she brought in the socioeconomic side. And for somebody like me from a region where we are dealing with the impacts of a changing climate every single day, Category 5 hurricanes are now a norm in the region where I'm from. It's scary, but it's the reality of it. So the outside course helped me to gain a much better understanding of disasters. And I was telling my editor, because they check up on me from the TV station at home, every week they call, what are you learning this week? I told him, okay, if something happened and I were to leave right now, and that was on Friday, yesterday, I would have left a better writer and much more knowledgeable in my area of expertise already. And it's only been a few months. So I know but that by May 2020, I would have left here really with all the skills and the tools necessary to report better and write better on my area of specialization, which is science and health.
Thank you, Allison. Tom.
Hi, I'm Tommy. I'm an MS student in the visual craft track, and I'll go into that a little bit later. I came from London, and I was a history major at UCL, and I spent a bit of time living in Chile and Bolivia and Mexico, reporting from there, and that was my kind of angle to come here, because I wanted to cover more on migration issues and security issues. And just before I came, actually, I'd had a little bit of time outside of journalism at this design agency called Pentagram, and I was 1 week I was in a boardroom, kind of, doing consulting stuff, whatever they do, and the next week I was here in New York, and my professors, pretty much on the first day, they gave us a whole load of envelopes, and they told us to open the envelope on our first class, and we opened it up, and it was a different neighborhood in New York City, and they said, right, we want you to go there now, and we want you to find a story in 3 hours and come back with it written. So that was our kind of first, experience. I got Soho, which is kind of very like influencer, Instagram friendly kind of place. So I'd never been to Soho, because I just rocked up a few days before. So it was a pretty, lively experience to start with. So the visual craft, it's a new specialization this year that you apply for once you've got into the MS normal program, and it's a cinematography specialization. So it was started by two professors. One is a cinematographer and the other one is a photojournalist, and they were concerned about how reporters didn't know how to make beautiful cinematic images. It was only people at the film school who could, go and work and make documentaries for Netflix and Hulu. So they're really interested on making, because a lot of, they think a lot of TV journalism is visually kind of quite trashy. So they, give us these amazing, beautiful, huge, intimidating cameras on the first day, and they, say like, see what you can do with it this weekend. Come back with an edited package of what you've seen. So it's been really, really helpful to also understand what constitutes a visual story, what constitutes a print story, and so that's why I've got I had three professors in my reporting class, and one of them was a print journalist, one photojournalist, one cinematographer. They're all kind of leading professors, and they would really chip in, and they would kind of give different parts of their life as, offer them up and gave us some really good advice. I came here to Columbia because, quite obviously, we're in a huge crisis of democracy, and I know it's a cliche, but like, democracy ceases to be democracy without journalism, and journalism was there to knock 135 billion pounds off the price of Facebook overnight. It was there to, uncover massacres in Vietnam by American soldiers that were covered up. It was, there to take down the biggest sex pest in Hollywood, and I'm sure there are plenty more for journalists to get into. But in all three of those cases, there was always pushback, and there were always people who didn't want your story to be published. And here, the professors really teach you to push against that pushback. And once you find a suspicion, or once you find something that's not quite right, to go in and to ask even more questions and report around it. And so what they've really been teaching us to do is find enterprise stories, and these aren't just stories you find from, press releases and things. It's asking one person at the end of the interview, asking them, do you know anyone who may know a little bit more about this? It's, finding the kind of third degree of separation from your kind of outer circle and dig really deep. And those are the stories that are of true public significance.
Thank you all very much. I suspect that you all might have some questions for our student panelists, and please come up to the microphone, because we do have quite a few people on the live stream, and they would like to hear your questions too.
Thank you.
Tip the mic up.
Yeah.
Just tip it up. There you go.
Good. Thank you. Hi, I'm Diego. I'm interested. I'm applying into the dual MBA MS journalism program. My background is mostly in banking here in New York. I'm involved in several projects with a newspaper back home in Venezuela, but I've never done journalism full time. So I'm wondering, from your standpoint, general advice for someone like me that mostly comes from a business background. How would you, sort of get up to speed in terms of becoming a potentially full-time journalism out of the program? Thank you.
Well, I would definitely, you've got business, and they always are looking for not just being a journalist, but having something else on the side. So let's say I use history as a way to contextualize current events, and that's kind of you've got business, which is a huge growing field, as the people on the last panel were saying. There are plenty of, courses and people you can speak to who are more than happy to, go for coffee with you. I think the whole faculty are so incredibly open and kind to people who are just interested in hearing more about their life. So you can always, send people a cold email. If you've read an article that you really admire, you can always just, get in touch, and they'll be happy to help you.
Ian, did you have a comment as somebody who also came to, you're newer to the field?
So I think, being new to the field, you're just going to learn a lot in the first few months. It's going to be really hard, but you're going to learn a lot and you're going to get a lot better. Also, coming from a background in kind of business, you take for granted how much you actually know about a field that a lot of people don't have insight into. You come in here and you're able to share, and you're able to sort of get a good angle on things really quickly, especially if you want to keep reporting in the business or kind of econ world. It's a really good leg up.
Any other questions? Yes, please go ahead, and we can take a line at the mic so that we can just keep going.
All right, so I have a question for those of us who don't have as strong experience in writing. How did you navigate the application process, if any of you had a similar experience, and then how do you feel supported so far within the program?
It's not about writing, it's about reporting. That's the main thing we were told when we came here. They said that people who didn't get it, they were, more interested in being writers as opposed to actually being reporters. And so they emphasize the idea of finding stories, not telling them in the application. And that's a really crucial thing they're looking for. 9 out of 10 people talk about, I like to tell stories. Anybody can really tell a story. It's about enterprise, and it's about, looking around the corner and seeing things that other people aren't seeing. And it's about getting out of your comfort zone. And it's about, speaking to human rights lawyers if you're interested in human rights. It's about, what your friends who aren't in journalism aren't doing. It's about, going to events on your own and, basically getting yourself out of your comfort zone.
Tuan, maybe you could talk a little bit about the writing course that you're taking, just so we can get some idea about that.
Okay, so for the application, and I actually got this advice from an editor I used to work with. She said, as an editor, we can always fix your writing, but we can't fix your reporting. So on the app, they're looking more for your train of thought, your logic. Can you work through this? Because the writing skills you can develop, we have professors here, and we're all taking writing modules. So I'm taking one called Art of the Profile, where you kind of learn how to write about people. But, she can teach you that, but you go in, you should know how to report by that point. And you, if not, at least have okay, this is what I want to do. This is how I'm going to get there. At least you can work your way through it. If not, get to the end goal.
Zoe, did you have any comments as somebody who's in the documentary program, how you're approaching the writing piece of this?
Well, I'd say for the application, for me, I think what's most important is that you articulate what's unique about you, as in why you don't have to write it as beautifully as someone who's got great writing experience, but if you can articulate why you would make a great journalist, because I think every person has like a unique set of experiences, skills, etc., that make you unique, and I think that's what will make you stand out, as opposed to like if you can write better than X, Y, and Z. And in terms of writing, yeah, to be honest, I was here like to get my hands on a camera and that sort of thing, but in our reporting class, you quickly realize people had different levels of experience, but as the earlier panel was saying, they kind of strip away what everybody knew before and are like building you up from scratch. So early days, you feel a little bit intimidated because someone's like, oh, I've been doing this for like 5 years, and you're like, oh, but immediately, like by week 3, once you get an understanding of what you're supposed to do, you'll surprise yourself, because they're guiding you. Like your professors know that they're not expecting you to be perfect. Like they didn't bring you here because you're perfect. They brought you here because you have the potential to be really good. So that's been my experience. Like, yes, in the beginning, maybe there'll be like some shaky stuff. We had a lot of people writing in a very academic manner, and it was like, this is not reporting, this is academic, but as soon as you get an understanding of what's expected of you, you'll get good.
Do I have any other questions from my audience? David, any from the live stream? All right, we've got a live stream question, and this is my colleague David Hooker, who organizes everything in the admissions office, including all of the people in the office. And he is to thank for everything that you see here today and also the food.
Tommy, this question is for you.
Hi.
Someone's interested from the live stream, if you could talk more about the visual craft, what types of classes you're taking now, and if any of them have a focus on photojournalism.
Yes, live stream is in luck. It's the normal, everything you'd take in the normal MS class, but you get extra classes, so you're kind of on a bit of a suicide trip. I mean, to put it frank, I don't think I've gotten home after midnight. I've gone home after midnight every single night this week, basically, just because, they really encourage you to not report in Manhattan, because Manhattan isn't New York. So I've spent a lot of time in, covering, Halloween dog-themed contests in Queens, and, construction union meetings in, South Brooklyn, and things like that. Every single day is a new day. And so with our photojournalism professor, she really makes us kind of get out there and go out to the, the corners of the city and report on that. So we have one video class at the moment where we're making a film for this Christmas. My beat is undocumented workers in New York City, so I'm doing a film on wage theft and the kind of and ICE deportations as well. And in my photojournalism class, we're doing an extended project, which is kind of a series of portraits, a series on a social issue, and yeah, we're kind of encouraged to leave Manhattan. That's the main thing. I mean, a lot of my friends who are New Yorkers I've been to more places in New York than they have in the last 3 months. Just that's how much they encourage you to leave this bubble.
And I would also mention that the photojournalism professor who is working with the visual craft track is Nina Berman, and the cinematographer that Tommy was referring to is Du Lin Tu. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Please.
Good morning. My name is Bridget. I wanted to start out by saying thank you so much for giving so much time to the question about the application and how to stand out in terms of not being a strong writer or not. And most of you seem to respond by saying that it's not about the writing, it's about reporting. But then for some of us applicants who also don't know how to report, what do you suggest is a way to stand out with our writing samples? And my second question is, what is something that you learned that you didn't think you would as an individual during this process? Thank you.
And what I'd like is maybe for two of you to talk about the writing and two of you to talk about the second question about what you've learned, since we are running a little bit short on time. And then we will also address your application question in the session on admission and financial aid. And that's a great question. Please.
Oh, I have two questions. One is Tommy specific.
We have to answer her questions first. Sorry. Who wants to go?
I can go for the second part because the writing is because I've been writing for so long. It's more difficult. But the second part is that, and I say that as someone with a lot of experience, just the writing. I think the first panel, the panel just before this said, forget about everything you know, and I think that was really important. And my editor warned me. He told me, when you get there, you should probably just zap your brain, just forget everything, and because you're going to be learning so much, and you're going to be learning it the right way in terms of structure and writing. And he was correct. So even in the MA program where you need more experience, you come in with experience. What I thought I knew, I actually probably didn't. So in some ways, even in our science seminar, it's a humbling experience, because one of the things we do is workshopping our essays. So we sit in round table setting, and the professor puts all our essays online probably by Sunday night. So on Tuesday we sit, and if it's my essay, I sit in a cone of silence, and everyone else goes around and we critique each other's work. So in some ways it's humbling, because you probably thought that was a very good essay that you submitted, but by the time it goes around the table you realize, man, I need to do so much more work on this. But it's really beautiful, and I told him so last week, because you get to see from the very first time you write something, and you get that sort of feedback, and then how it develops, you get to just see the beauty of it from the first draft to the final product. And so that's something I thought I knew what I was doing, but it was really nice that we got to peel back and then work on our writing. You do so. Those of you that, I know you have some issues and you have some concerns about the writing, you do get a lot of help at so many levels with your writing. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. There are resources on campus, and there's also a writing lab. So for people whose first language isn't English, some people English is their third language in our concentration, there is help, there's assistance. So I wouldn't be too worried about, just the writing levels.
Yes, Zoe.
So because I was applying to doc, obviously it was a bit different than applying to be like a print journalist. But I can explain from my perspective how I broke down. I hadn't made a doc before I got admitted. I made my first doc just before I came. But what I did in my writing was describe how I would, like the kind of stories I wanted to tell and what angles I would, like how I would attack taking trying to articulate what the issues around a specific subject matter. So because I hadn't actually done it yet, I gave samples of fiction pieces that I'd done, but spoke about how, in terms of documentary, I would like to do X, Y, and Z, and this is how these are the kind of subjects I'm interested in, these are the kind of issues, these are the kind of characters I'd be looking to put on screen. And so I hadn't done it yet, but so if you don't have reporting experience, you can maybe articulate how you would do X, Y, and Z.
Joanne, is there something so far that you wish that you had known? Is that remind me of your second question? Something you didn't expect to learn about.
I think this goes for almost everyone, no matter what program you're in, but I think you learn how much you're actually capable of. You know, when I came here, I was like, I'm just going to do this, and then I'll go out and continue doing sports reporting. But then, you know, you keep getting put into different situations where, you know, it seems hard and scary at first, and then you do it, and you're like, oh, it's actually fun. It's actually easy. So for me, I ended up, like Tommy, doing reporting outside of Manhattan. I ended up in the far Rockaways, which, if none of you know, it's like 2 hours away from here. So I was out there like 3 times a week in between classes. And, you know, I did a lot of reporting on like homeless shelters, and I got, you know, I made my way into them, and I like, you know, they don't really recommend this, but talked to like the homeless people, and then like talked to like drug addicts and like all of those people. And it is scary at first. You know, I'm not from the city, and this is in the middle of kind of nowhere. So I was like, okay, if this goes badly, this could go really badly for me. But I was like, look, I'm just going to do it and see what happens. And it was really good. You know, the people I talked to, even though they seemed scary, they were some of my best stories. They're some of the best quotes I got, you know, and I don't think I would have been comfortable doing that if my professor wasn't like, maybe you should try doing this.
Thank you. Go ahead.
So 2 questions again. It's a Tommy specific question for the first one. You mentioned you had some design experience at Pentagram, and I was wondering if you could elaborate a little more on how and if you were able to apply that design experience and knowledge into your visual craft track, like if there's opportunity and application for that specifically, as I'm very much interested in visual storytelling and journalism. And for the general panel, you know, at a Columbia and at an Ivy League institution, it's a given that the professors and the students are all insanely talented and accomplished individuals. My undergrad, the student body culture was very cutthroat and competitive. People were scared to share notes with students who were absent. And so I was wondering if you could touch upon what the sort of balance is like in student body culture between supporting and collaborating one another versus getting ahead, so to speak.
So the pentagram question, I didn't actually mention it in the application, but I think if you have experience in, you know, visual journalism, that is a huge asset. And I think you've got to submit, you know, 3 clips or something. Like, I think they would, I'm not on the admissions board or anything, but they would really appreciate, you know, a photo essay with, you know, written captions. Especially, you know, linking words to images and how they kind of work together. I think that's really important. It would be a really helpful asset for your application. So, yeah, I would encourage that.
I can speak to the second. Like, I had similar concerns about it being a cutthroat environment, and it's completely the opposite. So my first reporting class, we treated the class as a newsroom, and we treated each other as colleagues. So, you know, it's incredibly friendly, incredibly supportive, both like in class sharing sources, helping each other out with like angles on stories, and outside of class just being good and supportive friends to one another. You couldn't pick a better environment to like really grow and push yourself and have this supportive environment. So yeah, you don't have to worry about people being cutthroat. If they are, they're jerks.
And I'll add to that. I think one of the things that we were told to realize from very early on is that these are the people who you're going to need in the field. So if in class you're being, you know, cheeky, if you're being mean, if you're being, you know, not trying to collaborate with anyone, then you don't know if that's the person who's going to tell you about a job opening at their workplace, or who you're going to be sitting in front of when you're interviewing in 5 years' time, and they're going to remember those kind of things. So one of the things that I think we've all made a conscious effort of is making sure we actually get to know each other. So it's actually completely the opposite. Like, everyone is out trying to be helpful. Like, if someone sees someone is struggling with something in particular, people actually are very helpful and are like, oh, can I help you out? Here's an idea. Like, people, if you're struggling with something, people aren't afraid to speak up. That's one thing I found. Like, no one's judgmental. Like, you know, when someone's struggling on something, people kind of rally around them and are like, how can we help you? So it's actually been a great experience for me as well.
Oh, and everything is pass, no pass, so there's no like ruining of the curve or anything. That definitely helps with the competitive thing.
Just, I mean, to add to those 2 comments, I came here expecting everyone to be incredibly like pointy elbowed and, you know, pushing other people down. But the fact that it's pass and fail means that, no one's really in competition with each other. So, so for example, in all of my classes, we have like WhatsApp group chats where everyone kind of, checks story ideas with others and suggests things and, looks at, post events and things. So everyone is kind of in this together, which is a really nice, like, positive atmosphere.
Yeah, it's the same in the MA program. We have WhatsApp groups. Our science program is really small. It's just 7 of us. And then it's so diverse because only 2 out of the 7 are from the US. There's Brazil, Chile, me from the Caribbean, France in there. So for a lot of us, it's our first time living in New York too. So we come from all corners of the world and we sort of cling together. We look out for each other. If somebody's not in class, we shoot a quick WhatsApp message. We find out what's going on. Would you like me to record the notes, the presentation for you? So I found a really good community at a time when it's really important, especially if you're away from home, you really value that sort of community. And the professors they're the same. They look out for you. I think what is really beautiful about being here is that you never feel you're swimming in some ocean by yourself and you feel helpless. There is assistance and help at every level, from your classmates to the professors. There's always some office you can go to for assistance.
Okay, thank you very, very much. And I know that you all are going on to work on reporting and writing projects for the rest of the day.
And weekend.
So
yes.
Please take some food with you. And thank you again. All right, and now I'm going to invite Gina Boubian, who is the Director of Career Development. She has a lot of information that I think will also be interesting for you.
Morning. We're going to close the curtains a bit because I have a lot of charts to show you. Wow, okay. A little darker than I thought, but that's okay. Okay, good morning. So just quickly, there were a few questions I just wanted to add to. Diego, the student who asked about business journalism or having an MBA. Yes, so just so you know, it's an incredibly valuable skill set in the journalism job market, including plus your Spanish. So you will have a lot of access to opportunities, at least on the jobs side of things. Okay, so good morning. Very nice to see you. I'm part of the career development team at Columbia, and I'm delighted to talk to you about careers in journalism and what happens to our students. Our team we're a small team of former journalists, and we guide students one-on-one all year long. We provide one-on-one advising. We bring in dozens of employers, media professionals from the city and from around the world all year long, so you can meet them, talk to them about jobs, about what their company does. We run the largest journalism job fair in the country. It happens every spring, and all of our students participate, and I'll talk to you a bit more about that in a little while. So first, a reality check. There's no guarantee of a job after graduation. This is not like the law school or the business school where you've interviewed with companies and your first year and they're going to hire you by the end of graduation. This is journalism, and it operates on a sort of more of an immediate scale. We don't know what the journalism job market is going to be looking like in May 2020 or May 2021. We don't know which companies are going to bite the dust. We don't know which will rise from the ashes and reinvent themselves and launch new platforms. We don't know where there will be layoffs. We have no idea. But what we do know that is, regardless of flux in the journalism industry, our students do really well in the economy, and our students learn skills here that carry them through any kind of fluctuations in the economy. Our students are employed all over the world and throughout the country in the from the entry-level jobs to the highest echelons of management. I'm going to show you some statistics on how the class of 2019 did in the job market, so you can have a bigger picture of what journalism is doing, but also how our students specifically do. Okay, so as of graduation, 77% of the class had something lined up, and we take our measure at graduation, and we have 100% of the students in our data set. And this is important for you to understand as you are thinking about other grad schools perhaps. You need to be interrogating the data that you're finding on websites, and it's important to know when they're taking their data and how much of the class is in their data. So these are important facts that affect the data a lot. We take our measure right at graduation because first of all, that's when we're going to get 100% of the class included, and we're all journalists, so we're kind of obsessed with having complete data sets. And also, we feel that this is a big investment of your time and your money. And if I were a student, I would want to know what's going to happen to me at graduation. I'm less concerned what's going to happen 9 months after graduation or a year after graduation. So that's why we do that. When we talk about jobs or plans, I just want to also explain, we're talking about a broad range of pursuits because our students are adults who have a lot of things going on, personal goals, other goals, and different visions. So when we talk about plans, this includes jobs, it includes internships and fellowships, it includes students who are going on to another academic degree program. It includes students who have decided to do freelancing as a serious, deliberate pursuit. So it's a range of prospects. The numbers do tick up all summer long as we continue to hear from students, and we have once the school year starts, we're super busy with the current class, so we don't have time to sort of methodically check in with students, but we've done a little bit of LinkedIn research here and there, and our figures are probably in the upper 80s by now based on everybody we've heard from and the occasional checks that we've done. So this will continue to change. This number's always in flux. Okay, so as I said, 77% of the class had plans lined up at graduation, and this pie chart shows you that range of plans. What stands out when you look at this pie chart? I hope it's the blue slice, which is the internship and fellowship piece of the pie. For as long as we can remember, this has been sort of the biggest chunk of positions out of J School, and this is a trend that holds for regardless of what group you fall into at the J School, whether you're a U.S. citizen or green card holder, whether you're an international student, whether you're an MA or an MS student. The numbers will differ a little bit, but throughout all those groups, internships and fellowships are taking up the big piece of the pie. So, and this is because in the journalism industry in the United States, there is a really vibrant farm team system that internships are for. It's the way that news organizations will recruit and find talent and also retain talent. So when we're also talking about paid internships, I know that a lot of our international students are really wary of the idea of internships because they think it's an unpaid gig, and it's not. I mean, there are definitely some unpaid internships out there, but they're really so rare, and our students just aren't engaging in that system at all. So we actually love internships and fellowships. It's how our students will catapult from a tiny news organization or not a journalism career at all before J School to a much bigger news organization after J School. So just a couple of seconds I want to spend on international students. Are there any international students in the room who will be applying for OPT or, okay, and then possibly on the live stream as well? So I want to just comment on how international students have done compared to U.S. citizens out of Columbia. This chart shows you sort of comparing the two groups over a stretch of time. And what you should see in this range is that sort of U.S. students and international students have kind of gone neck and neck over time. There's a difference of like 1 or 2% between the two groups every year. Sometimes the international students are up, sometimes the U.S. citizens are up, but it hasn't been all that different. What we tell students at the outset is that international students are going to end up, you have to try a lot harder to basically end up in the same spot at graduation. And how that plays out in practice is that international students do apply for a lot more jobs and positions in general than the rest of the students. But if they do that, it turns out well. I do want to point out that big spread in 2017, which you can definitely see on this chart. And that was something that was an aberration, we hope. And just some context, that was the spring that Trump took office. And that year, only 66% of the international students had something lined up, compared to 78% for the U.S. citizens and green card holders. And it was a sort of a depressing, semester on campus. The international students were very demoralized, and a lot of them decided to go home at graduation rather than stick around and look for work. And in fact, the number of students who went home was double the usual number. In addition, there may have been some employers who were hesitant to hire international students because they worried that they were going to have visa issues. So, that was definitely in the water at that time. The situation sort of rectified itself by the following year, as you can see from this chart. And then last year, the international students did do a little better than the U.S. students. So I do want to say that the majority of these positions are internships, which I said, especially for the international students. And when we talk about internships, just one other thing. For those of you who've done internships in newsrooms, But for those of you who haven't, internships in journalism are extremely professional. You are expected to pull your weight from the very first day. This is not about getting coffee, doing menial tasks, putting their mail into their mailboxes. That's not what internships are like in J school. After J school, you are sent out on stories. You're expected to file, and the class that's here now is so lucky in a way, because next summer is going to be an all hands on deck situation because of the elections. It's going to be super busy. All of our students this class that we have now is in for a wild ride next year as they enter the job market, because there's going to be so much news to go around that interns will be turned to for these stories. I do want to make one comment about business journalism. Business journalism is definitely where where a lot of the hiring is going on, and it's where many of our international students do end up because of the supply and demand, and because of the language skills that the international students bring to the table. Spanish language skills are also in extremely high demand, and we have seen students get sponsored for the long term, actually, who do have Spanish fluency. Okay, let's just talk about now what employers are looking for. And this goes to that earlier question that the student asked about jobs, which got a response from former Dean Lemon and Elena Cabral. So at the Career Expo, we ask students, we ask employers, what are you looking for mostly? And this is their answer. We ranked them to make it sort of easy to see in a visual. But basically, employers come to the J School looking for reporters. And not, writing, yes, but reporting is sort of the number one thing. And a distant second place is video reporting and production, followed by data journalism. Now, I could have shown you, how these rankings have changed over time, but it was a super messy chart, and I didn't want you to bombard you with that. But I will tell you that data journalism, computing, analytics, all this stuff has definitely moved up in the ranks a lot, and so has audio reporting and production. There is a huge boom going on in the podcasting universe right now, which is super exciting, and so that is definitely something that is increasing. But at the end of the day, editors come here looking for reporters who can go out, tenaciously report stories, ask all the questions, stay 4 hours at the scene until you get everything you need and come back, and you know how to work through data as well. Okay. These categories at the end that sound vaguely sort of technological, analytics, innovation, R&D. This is for the computer and data science data students here. These were categories that we didn't study up until this year, because we kind of couldn't really put our finger on it, to be perfectly honest with you. But they've sort of emerged as necessary skills. And so, grouped all together, you can see that data/computing is a pretty big, has a lot of representation here. Okay. Coincidentally, what are our students actually doing out there? So at the end of the class, what's the main thing that you're doing in your job or your internship? And by a long shot, the vast majority are telling us that they've been hired to write and report. What's interesting about this is regardless of platform, which I'm going to show you next what that looks like. But so reporting and writing is the main thing that our students get hired to do. This has stayed. This has been the case for years and years, as long as we've been looking at this question. And a distant second is video and audio. Audio and video increased last year, and that was, again, because of audio it's sort of exploding, which is, as I said, extremely fun and exciting. And data and computing sort of wraps up all the things that I just talked about, and it's definitely a growing field. So the first three categories that you see on this chart add up to 94% of the class. Everything else is the other 6%. It doesn't mean that students, you don't become photographers. It's just it's really rarefied to get a photography job. It's really hard. There are some photo internships out there, and our students have gotten them, but there aren't that many of them. It's quite hard to launch into photography. As far as on-air reporting, does anybody here want to be an on-air local news reporter? So this job is something that it's almost like not realistic looking at this chart for this one category, because on-air reporting in local news markets does not have a big, robust system of internships and fellowships. You just get a full-time job. So what happens is our students work on their reels and those stories that to send out to news directors, basically after the expo, as graduation is coming. So it's sort of after graduation, they're sending out their reels, and they feel like they've got a good reel. So they're sending it out in the summer and getting hired in the summer into full-time jobs. So we do have plenty of J-School grads out in the world doing on-air reporting, but it doesn't show up in the statistics quite accurately because they're looking for full-time jobs, more or less. Okay. I also want to make a comment to the student who asked about, preparing for the new kinds of jobs that are on the job market. So, when I was getting into journalism, and I still hear it sometimes, it was kind of cool for a journalist to say, I'm doing journalism because I was bad at math. All these people think that they're bad at math. It's no longer sort of cool to say that. Math and data is extremely important to being a good journalist. So what students are definitely learning here is investigative skills is on everybody's schedule, because this is what it distinguishes our students from other students, but also it's what makes for better journalism. And we hear that from employers all the time. A couple years ago, we had a recruiter from Gannett, USA Today Network's Gannett at the expo, and he was explaining that they were running focus groups in their newspapers across the country, sort of bringing in readers and asking, what do you want? And everybody said, investigative. We're so sick of opinion. We want data. We want investigations. Fact-based journalism. So it's really true. So our students do a lot of that. Our students learn a lot of data skills. Just a couple weeks ago, one of the professors who's teaching education reporting in the spring emailed us to tell us that her class in the spring, this coming spring, is going to have a very heavy data component. She's planning to bring in Brown Institute data instructors for half of the class to help students use data. Because as any of you have covered education or read education, you know that it's this huge pile of jargon-laden, messy data, and there's just so much of it. So she's going to teach students where to find this stuff, how to mesh data sets together over county lines and state lines, and it's just very. So that's what's happening here, and there are a lot of other classes that also incorporate a lot of data and numbers. Okay. This is an interesting chart. So what this is showing you is we also ask students what medium or what platform have you been hired into, and this shows you the trajectory of the various platforms over time. This goes back to 2010. But last year, so the red line is the digital-only platforms. This is like Mike and Marshall Project, this is the sites that exist only online. And that has been a sort of a rising trajectory until last year, where there was a plunge, which looks like a plunge. We'll see what happens at the end of this year. But that was because of a bunch of layoffs in Mike, courts. There were hiring freezes here and there. BuzzFeed had layoffs, and so we think that obviously affected our chart. The blue line that's going up, that's the video and audio production line. That would include podcasts, and also it would include the public radio stations and the networks, NBC, CBS, etc. And that has definitely been on a sort of a wild ride, but definitely on the upswing over time. And again, I do think that audio is what sort of is forcing that up. That trajectory up at the moment. The green line is the newspaper line, and we talk about all these platforms. It's the newspapers plus online staff, broadcast plus online staff, and this line surprises students when we show it to them, because everybody says newspapers are dead, and yet they've totally been holding their own here for a long, long time. And all these newspaper companies showed up at the expo. Elena Cabral mentioned how we learn a lot about the state of the industry at the expo, and it's really true. We were actually surprised when all these newspaper companies showed up at the expo and had dozens and dozens and dozens of jobs to offer. We were surprised, and so our students have been sort of going to newspapers again and getting trained by professional editors who know what they're doing and can help you become a better reporter. So the orange line is the magazine trajectory. This is most definitely on the downturn, and we have watched it sort of slide for a long, long time. And this should not surprise any of you who read magazines. Magazines in the beginning of the internet were holding out, thinking we don't have to do that internet thing. People will always want to curl up in a comfy chair in the corner with their cup of coffee, and that turned out not to be true. So we've also seen that newspaper staffs have shrunken, and they're mostly they're editors, small group of editors with a bunch of freelancers. So our students don't really go into magazines as much as they used to, many years ago. Also, what has happened in the magazine world is that voicey, authoritative magazine style writing has migrated online. So we have seen students instead of going to a magazine, they'll go to the Marshall Project or to Vice or to The Trace, where they can do the long form, investigative, voicey kind of journalism that they want to do, writing with a capital W. We have a lot of students who come here wanting to become writers with a capital W, and you can do it on numerous platforms. Okay, you have a list in your folder of all the companies that hired somebody from the class of 2019, but I thought a little word cloud would be fun to show you, because it's fun to make, and I could use nice colors, but you can also see that the bigger the font, the more students were hired by that company. So we had CNN is a perennial popular hirer of our students, and so is Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, and ABC News. So this kind of just shows it to you visually. There were about over 100 companies that hired people from the class of 2019. Okay. So let's just talk about that. So the power of the J-School brand, the quality of the students, and the fact that we're in the media capital of the world has resulted in some concentrated hiring at certain companies throughout New York and DC mostly. But so by the end of the summer, the number of students who had been hired at CNN was more like a dozen. Bloomberg took 8 people, ABC News took 7, and so on. So this is just showing you how popular our students are with the major news organizations across the country and the world. Okay, I try to slip this slide in, discreetly to talk about salaries. But all kidding aside, salaries in journalism do not start out all that high. But there's a huge range. Okay, so the minimum wage right now in New York City is $15 an hour, so that's the minimum. On up to $1,200 a week at a place like Bloomberg. The typical pay is between $600 and $700 a week, regardless of what location. And this is to keep in mind, this is a temporary situation. Internships are 10 weeks to 10 to 12 weeks, and then something happens after that is an improvement. For full-time jobs, pay ranges from $35,000 to $65,000 plus benefits, with a high of out of last year's class at $145,000, and this went to a student who had quite a bit of experience. Minimum wage can be pitifully low in other parts of the country, just FYI. But again, the cost of living is much, much lower in other parts of the country. And again, this is a temporary situation. And our students will, some students can't afford to take these minimum wage internships. But if you can, you just weather it for a bit. It usually ends up a good situation because you're getting so many clips and such good training, and it always leads to somewhere else. The expo, I thought I would just brag about the expo. Elena gave us a little bit of a shout out, but we did have 336 recruiters come to the expo in March 2019, representing 163 news operations. They came to interview our students for the full day. It was extremely exciting. There were like 300 students in the room talking to these recruiters who outnumbered them. And if recruiters knew that they were outnumbered, I don't know what that would do. But it's a good situation for our students. They interview all day long. They move from interview to interview. We helped set it up so that there are no gaps in the recruiter's schedule. This maximizes everybody's time. And it's an incredibly productive day. There are dozens and dozens of job offers that come out of the expo. And that's because they're like real interviews where the students prepare in advance. They bring their clips, and there's an exchange, and there's follow-up, and there's thank you notes written afterwards. Okay, I would advise all of you to use LinkedIn to do a little bit of research on how many Columbia people there are at your dream publication, and do it for every university that you're looking at. And just go on LinkedIn. There's a look for the school's LinkedIn page, and ours is Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism, LinkedIn, easy to find. And then there's an alumni button, and that takes you to a search engine, and you can just type in, see how many alums are in Colorado or at Vice or whatever you want. But it gives you just an idea of the power. And this is a disappointing list to me because I built this when I had briefly lost premium access like a little while ago, and so I wasn't able to count the whole number, but these numbers are a lot higher. We have a lot more than 50 people at the New York Times and a lot more than 30 at NPR. At the bottom, I thought I'd just add Report for America in, because this is a new exciting launch that maybe some of you have heard of. Has anybody heard of Report for America? So it's this nonprofit foundation that is aiming to put 250 reporters in newsrooms next year in 2020 to 2021, year-long fellowships. And they're attempting to put reporters where there are news deserts, or even in big cities where there have been gaps in coverage. So it's really exciting. There were 60 fellows placed this current year, and 7 of them were our students. And they went to places as remote as Yellowstone, Public Radio, and The Advocate, which is the newspaper in New Orleans, which is not remote in a very big city. So there was a whole range, and we are excited about it. Our alum Charlie Sennett was the co-founder of Report for America, and we're really happy that it's happening. I thought it would be fun to just now talk about some specific stuff that our students have done who just graduated. So Julia went to the LA Times for the summer, and she was immediately thrown into some really big stories. They sent her to Gilroy to do a reaction to the shooting at the Gilroy Garlic Festival that happened in the summer. There was some earthquakes in California last summer, which you probably remember on the news, and she was right there for that. And then this was another story just about the incredible affordable housing problem in LA area. And she teamed up with Ruben Vives, who won the Pulitzer a few years ago on a corruption scandal in the local city of Bell. And by the way, Julia had no journalism. She had one journalism internship in the summer immediately before J School, but she had been a history major before and not in journalism at all, and she's now at CNN. Isaiah was at Morehouse College, where he ran the Maroon Tiger, the student newspaper there. He had worked at ESPN before J School, and he came here, and somehow in the process of his year, he changed his mind about sports reporting. He didn't want to be a sports reporter as much as he thought, and he took this full-time job at the Miami Herald, and he's so happy. But it's his busy job. It's a breaking news reporter, and he's just running around doing a lot of news. This is the Marshall Project, very beautiful site that does deep reporting, award-winning, Pulitzer Prize-winning reporting on criminal justice. And our student Weha was one of our data journalism concentrators from last year. She was from Boston University and is an international student, and she has been teaming up with them to do the data visualizations. And there's lots of data in the criminal justice world, as you can imagine, and they've kept her past the summer, and she's still there cranking out data visualizations and helping reporters sort of conceptualize the best way to show their stories visually. And she's having an incredible time. This is an exclusive internship that we have with Marshall. It's a very competitive place. It's hard to get a job there. It's almost impossible, but we have figured out a way to get them to take 2 of our students every summer for an internship. Okay, just quickly, some trajectories that students have. So I mentioned Julia. She went from the Berkshire Eagle, which is up in in the corner of Massachusetts, came to Columbia, then LA Times, now she's at CNN. Samantha was at University of Missouri undergrad, and she worked as a business reporter for a year after graduating from undergrad, and then she came here, and now she's a full-time reporter at the American Lawyer. Brianna, it was from Florida State University in Miami area. She had a couple internships before Columbia. One of them was at Politico. Then she came here, and she was hired full-time as a fact checker at the New Yorker. So I showed you these 3 because these were grads who came directly from undergrad to Columbia without a big gap. Okay, then we have career changers here as well. So we have students here who have done other things, and then they decide to do journalism, like Erica. She was teaching in AmeriCorps in Indianapolis, which soured her on teaching, but lit the fire under her for her new passion, being an education reporter. She came here, and she went to the Hechinger Report, which is based at Teachers College immediately after graduation, and now she's a full-time education reporter covering K through 8 at the Austin American-Statesman, and she met the Austin American-Statesman executive editor at the Expo, who came to the Expo. Pranshu was working in city government. He was not only in the city of Philadelphia's mayor's office, but he had also worked on Capitol Hill in D.C. and also in the city of New York. He came here, got the investigative internship at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and then by the end of the summer, they offered him a full-time City Hall reporter job, which is an amazing promotion to get. And so now he's down in Philly, where he's from. Paul was at Human Rights Watch and came to Columbia to sort of deepen his reporting, but also sort of take sort of the advocacy element out of his career and move into pure journalism. And now he's at The Intercept, which is definitely sort of a national security investigative data-based website. And then these are students who have been out for a couple years. I just wanted to tell you what they're doing. So Sarah had, no reported clips at all before coming here. She wrote opinion for the Daily Cal, which is the daily newspaper in Berkeley that that Berkeley runs. She floated around for a bit after that, and then she came to Columbia. She got the graduate traineeship at Reuters, which is a 9-month program, and then she was hired full-time into the Istanbul bureau at Reuters. Alex was, he was very involved in his student newspaper. He had a couple internships after in journalism, and he came to Columbia. Then he went to the Miami Herald. During his first week in the job, his master's project was published on the front page of the New York Times, which was very exciting. And then after the summer, he was like the maternity leave fill-in for somebody in the McClatchy Bureau in Washington, and then he was hired full-time, and he's still there. Heather was a multimedia fellow at the Scripps Howard paper in Michigan, and then she came to Columbia, and she is in the Lenfest Fellowship at the Philadelphia Inquirer Daily News, which is a 2-year-long fellowship doing photo, basically. And she was just nominated for an Emmy for something that she did with another couple people at the Philadelphia newsroom. That's it. That's all I have. If anybody has any questions, if there's any time, I know we're running late, but if there's time, I'd be happy to answer questions. You know what? When you interview for a job, the person says, "Do you have any questions for me?" You always have to have questions. Oh, okay. I don't want to force you or anything.
Yeah, no, but I'm curious because you talked about the career changers and you showed some interesting things. I'm very curious right off the bat to know what freelance fixer means in that context.
Freelance fixer.
Yeah, the person who was in Turkey, it said freelance fixer, I think.
Well, good question. I'm trying to remember exactly. She was working for the BuzzFeed correspondent. There were several correspondents, and she was sort of attaching to them and helping them find sources and stuff.
I thought maybe like Michael Clayton, she was doing weird lawyering for
I think
people in trouble or
she
something.
spoke some languages. No, she was like, there's a job in the Middle East of just finding the sources for reporters who are just arriving or who aren't well sourced or whatever.
Cool. Sounds like a good gig. I was just curious for the career changers.
It wasn't. That's why she came here.
Well, to supplement what she learned here. But I'm curious to know, for people who are coming from a different career and come to the J School and then go to fairs like that, is that a positive, negative, neutral for recruiters? Do they see just the J School training and say, okay, now we know that they can come in carte blanche and do whatever we need them to do?
There are a lot of employers who have been continually happy with our grads because of the training they get here, and so there's definitely a cadre of employers there who totally trust the training that you get here and will hire you after this. I mean, one of our students went to the Des Moines Register with hardly any she was working for hercampus.com at Michigan. Which is not really journalism. It's more like essays and opinion. But yes, it depends too what you're trying to do. If you're trying to, if you can make sense of your trajectory, employers buy it totally. A student who was a teacher before can absolutely make the case that she's the very best person to be the education reporter. Yeah, so it's, a person in the business world also can easily say, well, I, don't have to take classes at SEPA. I already know, accounting and finance and all that. So it just depends.
Great. And I'm somebody who is, speaking of SEPA, interested in a dual degree program with SEPA. So I'm curious, as far as career opportunities, is that something where people normally look at the career fair for the J School and also SEPA careers? Is that something where people come in and they say, hey, I'm here to then go into this?
I think we have dual students every year that do SEPA first or J School first. I know you have to learn a second or a third language over there, which is great. And I know that we do have employers who definitely value that dual degree, because it's definitely more sort of development and policy and language training over there. And we've seen students get jobs at the wire services, Reuters, Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, Al Jazeera, stuff like that.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
A question regarding students in the documentary track. Are they attending that job fair in the spring, or are there separate resources for them after the summer semester?
Well, they do attend, because they are going to be looking like 3 months from then. And there are a lot of students that are in the same boat, students who arrive at the expo who've already lined up an internship, so they're not going to be available until September anyway. So we do advise our documentary students to come to the expo and just meet all these employers for later, but there's no sort of secondary job fair for them later.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Yes.
You were talking you inspired me with so many examples, and I don't know if it's possible, but I'd like to do a little experiment, but I don't know if I can try some classes, and because just before you, they were talking about investigative journalists, and I don't know how it works, because you were talking about internship, and it was so interesting, and I don't know, because there's people from admission that may be better to answer that, but still your presentation was really inspiring to me, and that's why I'd like to try, like, for a day or two, to be like I don't know, in back home we call that visitors.
I don't know if that happens here. Maybe
Yes.
Christine knows. Yes.
We can make arrangements for you to visit some of the classes.
Okay.
You can get in touch with us in admissions. David, in particular,
Okay.
can help you with that.
Yeah, but thank you. It was really inspiring.
You're welcome. There's also continuing education classes here that are sort of journalism light, like little doses.
Okay.
There's like an audio workshop in January, it's a 3-day audio workshop, and, they're very short. There's investigative course in the summer.
Okay.
They're much, much shorter, but it is a way to sort of check it out.
Thank you.
One more question. Yes.
So for the people in the part-time Masters of Science program, what does it look like after they graduate? Do they tend to stay where they are, or like how does that typically
It's a
work?
range of things, but the part-timers are typically hold on to the job that they have when they start the program, because think about it, you've got an employer who is cutting you some slack and letting you come here for classes all the time. So you've got somebody in your corner. If you were to switch jobs and get a new journalism job at the beginning of J school, you've got an employer who wants you for 110% of your time, and it's hard to do that. So usually our students, our part-timers, hold on to what they have, and at some point in their second year or the end, they start to think about moving away from that, unless they've got an employer who says, okay, we just paid for your tuition, we expect you to sign on for another 2 years or whatever, and that definitely is going on for some of them. Our part-timers end the year obviously employed, and some of them make the change to some other kind of journalism job. And it's, to each his own. Sometimes you'll stay in your job and then get promoted, and that's what you kind of wanted all along. It's a whole lot of range of things that can happen. Employers, meanwhile, love the part-time students. They don't differentiate. Everybody is treated equally here. Okay. Thank you so much for your time, and enjoy the rest of the day and the weekend and the New York Marathon tomorrow. Worth watching.
All right, I know we are very beyond our schedule here. I'm going to take 2 minutes to talk about admissions and financial aid. And people should feel very comfortable getting in touch with us in the admissions office to ask any specific questions that you have about your personal situation. And Taryn and David and I will also be here for a bit afterwards and can help you with any questions too. So first of all, for admissions, we've had a couple of people ask questions about the application process, how to make yourself stand out. What I would say about the application, it's just like all the other college applications you've filled out. We ask for a resume, for several essays. One is autobiographical, one is about your interest in journalism and why you want to study journalism at Columbia Journalism School. So you get the opportunity there to make your argument for why you're a good fit for Columbia Journalism School and why you feel that Columbia is a good fit for you and what you want to learn. Think as you're preparing to do that essay, think about the gaps that you have in your education and experience, and then take a look at the program that you're applying to, and what you're trying to do is make the argument for why that particular program is going to enable you to fill those gaps and move on to whatever would be the next level for you in your career as a journalist. And you can do that whether you have absolutely no journalism experience at all. You can do that if you're a journalist with maybe a year or two of experience. And you can do that if you're a journalist with 5 to 20 years of experience, depending on what you're looking for. And sometimes you're a journalist and you've looked at the data program and you've said, that is a huge gap in my skills. I'm really interested in that, and I want to work on a data team at a news organization. So that's where your argument is. So think about it that way. For some of the specialized programs, so investigative, documentary, data, and all 4 of the Master of Arts concentrations, you will do a 3rd essay about your interest in that particular concentration or specialization. Again, you're making the argument for it. People who are applying to the MA, remember that in general, it's people who have experience as journalists and who, I think as Winnie put it, they understand how to produce a story, how to do the reporting, how to do the writing. For all of our programs, you're not going to be a perfect writer. In fact, I don't think anybody here is a perfect writer. When I think about here at the journalism school, the reason that you apply and enroll in journalism school is to learn how to improve your writing. And I think that's actually one of the exciting things about being here is everybody is on that same page as far as always working to improve themselves, even if they're people who have been journalists who've been practicing for many, many years, always trying to improve what you do. We look for a resume. We look for 3 letters of reference in the application. Who should those be from? They should be from people who have supervised your work. So not just people who know you well, but people who have supervised your work and been responsible for either giving you a grade in a class or doing your performance appraisal at work. So what does that mean? Know people who are your colleagues, your immediate colleagues who are at the same level as you are. Not your parents, not your grandparents, not your friends, okay? Even though those are some of the people who definitely know you the best, but it's people who have supervised your work and evaluated your work, because we are asking them to give us an evaluation of your prospects for success, A, at journalism school, and B, as a journalist. How can you help them help your application? you can already have thought about your journalism essay. You can already have written your journalism essay. You will already have updated your resume, because then you can send both of them to your recommenders after you've contacted them with an email that says, thank you so much for agreeing to do this. We had a short conversation about what I am aiming to do at journalism school, but since we haven't been in contact too much recently, I wanted you to have my updated resume, and I've also added one of the essays that I'm going to use in my application, just so that you have a good idea of what I'm thinking about as far as my next step in journalism. That will help your recommenders monumentally in crafting a recommendation that will be of assistance to you. I will also say, in 35 years in doing admissions and financial aid, I think that I have seen maybe 3 letters of reference where the person who was doing the recommendation should have said to the person when they were asked to do it, no, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now for you. Most people are happy to and able to give good and strong recommendations. What you want to do is just give them a little bit of help, because what you're doing with your application is you're building your story. So, you're creating the story of why you want to go to journalism school, why Columbia is the right place for you, and what your career aspirations are afterwards. Because the people here who are reading your applications, and there will be 3 people who will read your application, and there will be a committee, and sometimes 2 committee meetings to go over your applications. We do go over them carefully. We know that you put a lot of work into them. Think about the story that you want to tell, because we are looking for people who want to come here for what we offer and who want to succeed and excel as journalists. Keep in mind that Columbia has just a journalism school. So at the journalism school, we do not do public relations, we do not do media studies, we do not do communications with the exception of our PhD degree. We do not do strategic communications. We do journalism. And so we are looking for people who want to be journalists. And I'm going to repeat that because there are a lot of people who are interested in writing. There are people who think they might like to go into journalism for a number of different reasons. But what's important for you to keep in mind as you put your application together is that we are looking for people who want to be journalists. At heart, they are reporters. That's what we do here. That's what the faculty do. The student body here is consumed with journalism and by journalism. It's extremely painful for somebody who does not have that same ambition here. And you're paying a lot of money for it. And I don't believe in paying a lot of money for pain unless it's going to resolve some issue for you. So think about your application in that way. We also need transcripts from every single university you ever attended. You only took 2 courses? Send me the transcript. You were there for just a semester? Send me the transcript. The courses you took are on another transcript of the school you transferred to? Send me both transcripts. All right? All transcripts For international students, because I know we've got some international students on the live stream, students from the People's Republic of China, you will need to send your transcripts by way of CHESEC. You'll find information about that in the application instructions. International students, we will also be looking, once people are admitted, to have your transcripts verified, generally by the World Education Services. All of that is covered in the application instructions, so I'm not going to spend any more time on it there. We do not require standardized tests. So the MS program, the MA program, we do not require the GRE. International students whose first language is not English or who have not studied in a fully English language university for all 3 or 4 years of their bachelor's degree studies must take either the TOEFL or the IELTS. MS students, there's also a writing test. It's a 90-minute test. It's a writing test. There are no sort of got you kinds of questions. There's no multiple choice. There's no map question. If you look on the internet and you see the test from 2003, forget about it. That was 15 years ago. We don't do that anymore. It's a writing test. It's a series. You can choose from a series of questions for the ones that you are comfortable answering. They cover different types of news events, news stories, but basically they give you the opportunity to show us what your writing is like. You've written essays, you have provided also work samples, at least one of which should be a written sample, and then you'll do the writing test. Each of those is a chance for us to see what your writing is like. Again, we're not looking for perfection. If you were already a great writer, you wouldn't need journalism school. What you're coming here for is to learn, to stretch yourself, to learn new things about reporting, about writing, and about subject areas. That's all I'm going to say right now about the application. Does anybody have any questions about that? Yes, please go to the mic.
Hi, thank you. I just have 3 questions. I was wondering, for a student that isn't coming from a liberal arts background, what would be the weight of the undergraduate transcript in the application?
That is a great question. We do not care what your undergraduate major was. Journalists, what's actually the most important, or one of the most important qualities that we look for in an applicant, is curiosity, and curiosity about everything. Journalists have to write about many things, and they're sent out to write about many topics. Anything is fine. Any undergraduate major is fine, whether it's arts, humanities, the sciences, the hard sciences, business, professional school. So if you've done an education degree, for example, anything at all.
And you also mentioned that the GRE is not required for the MS application.
Correct.
Would having a relatively high GRE score augment the application anyway, or is that not looked at?
My advice is that you spend your money and send your scores to the other schools that require them. Our faculty are allergic to the GREs, with the exception of the doctoral faculty who require them. Our faculty feel that the GRE has absolutely no relationship to predicting who might be a good reporter. What's going to be most important will be your writing. Qualities such as curiosity, persistence, determination, because as several of the faculty speakers mentioned, there are a lot of people who don't want you to get your story. So that those qualities of persistence and determination are very important. Storytelling, we're looking for storytellers. And then a passion for journalism. That's what we're looking for.
Thank you. And I was just wondering if you're able to disclose your acceptance rate for various programs.
They're all different, so I'm not going to go through them all right now, but they're all different because we've got small groups within each program, and they are all, the admissions for each, they're different for each one. So my advice is apply. Why do I say that? Because if you don't apply, no matter what happens, you're not going to have any choice.
Thank you.
Other questions? Anybody else who has a question, come to the microphone right now. Come up and form a line. Yes, please.
I'm Kate. I was just wondering, sorry. In terms of writing samples that we provide, if we don't come from a journalistic background where we have a ton to pull from, what would you prefer us to do, right, for that prompt in a
Great
recording?
question. There are a lot of people who come to us without a journalistic background. There are lots of ways you can approach that. I have had people come from finance who spent a lot of their business days writing things like country reports or evaluations of this, that, or the other. They've done a lot of writing, which has included analysis, which has included at a certain level reporting, because they've had to go talk to people, do research, that sort of thing, and then incorporate it into their writing. We're looking for writing that shows evidence of either reporting, research, and then your analysis and your synthesis. So that's what we're looking for.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Good morning.
Please tip the microphone up so people can hear you.
Yeah, all right.
There you go.
Better. Good morning. I'm still debating between applying for the PhD communication. I'm not a journalist. I don't have any background in it. But I don't know. We talked earlier about trying some classes in the master's.
Yes.
Is it the same? Is it possible to do that for the PhD as well?
Yes, and I think it would be best if you and I were to make an appointment together to talk about your interests and then which programs here would best fulfill those interests.
Good, thanks.
Yeah. Any other questions about the applications? I'll just tell you, if you come up with questions later, because that's when I always come up with the questions, feel free to email us, make an appointment to come back in to see us, that sort of thing. If you're interested in sitting in on a class to get a flavor of what the school is like, please feel free to get in touch with us at the admissions office with my colleague David. He will help you to arrange that with the professor. I'm going to talk very briefly about scholarships and financial aid. What we recommend for everybody who is thinking about graduate school is that you begin your financial planning now. I, of course, never thought about things like that when I went to graduate school, but now that I work in admissions and financial aid, I recognize that financial planning should come first and not last. Start thinking about your financial planning now. Regardless of where you go, graduate school is expensive. You're going to give up a year of income. If you're going to be in a full-time program, you might be giving up 2 years of income or 3 years of income. Start your planning now. How much do you have in your pocket? Which scholarships are you going to apply for? What do you have in your savings? What might you need to borrow? Make a budget, figure it out. it's always best to be prepared in that way, and it's best to have a plan A and a plan B, because sometimes plan A doesn't work out quite the way you thought, and sometimes plan A fails halfway through school because things happen in life. Columbia offers generous scholarships. We have a separate scholarship application which will go live in December. The application deadline for scholarship application is January 15th. Apply for scholarships. Apply for journalism school scholarships. When we plague you with those emails that say, fill out the scholarship application, do it. Do it. We can't consider you for J-School scholarships unless you fill that application out. That is different from some of the other journalism schools that you'll be applying to, which use the admissions application. Our process is completely separate. Our admission process is need blind, which is why we have separated the admissions application and the scholarship application. Look for third-party scholarships. We've got a big list on the scholarship and financial aid section of the website. Look at it carefully. International students, be sure to look at it as well. And I should say that J-School scholarships are for both domestic and international students. Make your plans, start doing the work, figure out which scholarships you're going to apply for, and make sure that you do it. Prepare a scholarship application or a scholarship essay ahead of time, and make sure that it's an essay that you modify to suit the scholarship that you're applying for. People want you to apply for their scholarships, third party, but they also want to think that you really want their scholarship. So they're looking for something that is not generic. Okay? So you're going to be, again, making the argument. It's going to be the same thing as applying to J-School or grad school. Same thing as applying for a job, your cover letter. You're making the argument for why you're a great candidate for that scholarship in particular. You would not believe the number of people who think it's fine to send a generic admissions application, generic scholarship application, and worst of all, generic job application letter. Don't let yourself fall into that trap. That's my best advice on applying for scholarships. Also think about things that pertain just to you. There are many scholarships that we don't know about. We've done a ton of research. There are lots that we know nothing about. For instance, I got a check for $10,000 2 years ago from a retirement home. I looked at that. I was like, why am I getting $10,000 from a retirement home? That retirement center had as a community project a scholarship. They did fundraising for a scholarship for either the child of somebody who worked there, or if the kid, him or herself, was there, that person could also apply for and receive the scholarship. I would never know that. The only people who knew that were the people who worked there. So those are the kinds of things. Think about yourself, think about the community that you come from, and apply for everything. Even apply for the ones that are $250, because I'll tell you what, there are a lot of people who look at that and say, not worth applying for. That organization really wants to award that to somebody and to feel proud of the person that they award it to. And $250 will get you 2 Metro cards. Think about your budget planning in that way and apply for everything, because it will start chipping away at all of those costs. You can also think about your costs as there are the university costs, which are the tuition and the university fees. you can't do anything about those. The university sets that, it's set in stone, and you have to pay it one way or another. Where you do have control is your living expenses. Are you going to rent a $3,000 apartment, a $3,000 a month apartment by yourself? Or are you going to have 4 people living with you to share those expenses? Are you going to be eating out? Are you going to be buying a sandwich every day? Or are you going to be bringing peanut butter and jelly for lunch and maybe a chicken sandwich for dinner? Think about your expenses in that way, because that's where you have control. But above all, apply for scholarships. The loans will be there for you to take out, believe me. The tuition and fees are not going to change, but apply for scholarships. You will find money. Apply for them, and start thinking about how you're going to chip away for that. Anybody have any quick questions on scholarships or financial aid? I think we're all exhausted. You guys have been amazing. Thank you for staying. I know that we're over. We really appreciate it that you have joined us today. Thank you all who are on the live stream. And again, if anybody has any questions, please feel free to contact us in the Admissions and Financial Aid Office. And those of you who are here in New York or will visit, we are also happy to make arrangements for you to visit a class, come get a feel for what the school is like. Thank you very much.